Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Local Plan Committee meeting, 2nd of August. So I've got housekeeping to let you know about. I think you've heard it so many times. For those attending here in the Moot Hall, I can assure you that a risk assessment, including COVID-19 risks, has been undertaken for this meeting. Can I remind everyone that seating is social distance and with 2 metres between each seat. Masks can be removed when seated. Councillor Barber is attending the meeting remotely via Zoom as he is isolating. Whilst he is able to speak and participate in the meeting, under the current government regulations, he will not be able to vote on any item. With the exception of the Democratic Services officers advising us, would participants, both those joining us online and in the Moot Hall, please mute their microphones unless they're invited to speak. I will announce by name and invite to speak those participants wishing to make representations to the committee members in order of business to be conducted. With the exception of Social Democratic Services advising us, would participants all mute their microphones? Got that? It's been repeated. I will ask each item of business to be presented and ask each member of the committee in turn if they wish to ask a question or comment at the end of each item of business tonight. And the services officer will confirm the outcome of the vote. We may have a short break at 8 o'clock, subject to the progress of business tonight. Introductions. I'm Councillor Gerard Oxford, the chairman for this evening, and on my right,
Councillor Tate, Prettygate Ward. I'm substituting for Councillor Moore.
Councillor Jeremy Hagan, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Luxford Vaughan, Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor Julie Young, Greenstead Ward.
Councillor Adam Fox, Old Heath, the Hythe and Rowhedge.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Officer.
Evening, Lewis Barber.
Lead Officer for Planning, Housing and Economic Growth.
Sorry, Karen.
thank you. So we now move on to done the substitutions. I can also mention that Councillor Cope was down to substitute for Councillor Coleman, but he felt unwell, so he's gone home. So just so they did have somebody, but he's gone home. And urgent items, there are none.
That's right, Chairman.
Thank
there are
you.
none.
Declarations of interest, please. No declarations of interest. Item 5, have your say on general items. We have nobody on general items.
There is nobody on the general have your say, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 6, can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record? Or are you making a comment?
I have a question arising. I'm happy to say the correct record, but I don't know where to bring it up on the agenda if I don't bring it up now.
Chair, there's an amendment to the minutes which we'd like to propose.
Then I'll propose the amendment to the minutes. Is that agreeable to you, or you still have an issue?
It's a separate issue. I'm happy with the amendment.
It's a separate issue. Would you like to raise it now before we vote?
Yeah, it was just on page 10. It says members were keen to be involved and consulted on the master plan process and requested a specific workshop with tendering local plan members. I just wonder if any progress had been made on that and whether a date had been set.
Chair, we'll follow that up separately after the meeting. Under our provisions, we don't normally do matters arising during the minutes. The minutes here to be confirmed or otherwise.
So that aside, can we agree the amended minutes, please?
Would you like me to propose them?
Yes, would you?
Yeah,
Chair, would like me to specify the amendment?
That might be a good idea, mightn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, please. Would you, Richard?
What we're seeking to amend is minute 214 on the local plan update. On page 8, the second paragraph to be amended to read, the council had sent a draft modification schedule to the inspector for comments. The inspector had not raised any other issues, and had he had concerns, he would have raised them early in the process and kept the council appraised of his views.
Are you still happy to propose
Yes, I am.
and seconder, please? Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Okay,
That's
thank
agreed,
you.
Chair.
Item 7 is next, and we have no speakers on item 7, but we have Shelley Blackaby who's going to present for us, please. And the Leader of the Council is joining her. Evening, Shelley. Shelley, evening. I had to look round the microphone. All yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Shelley Blackaby, Garden Community Planner. This report provides an update on progress with the Tendring Colchester Borders Garden Community Master Plan, Engagement Programme, Lead Developer Announcement, and National Model Design Code. Members are aware that the Planning Policy team are working with officers from Tendring District Council and Essex County Council on a development plan document, a DPD, to guide development for the Tendring Colchester Borders Garden Community. Pryor and partners have been appointed to prepare a master plan for the garden community, which will form part of the DPD. A baseline report is currently being prepared. The baseline report will set out the planning policy context, provide a wider site and character analysis, and provide a thematic site analysis. It will capture the condition of the site as it currently stands with respect to land ownership, physical landscape profile, heritage assets, flood risk and drainage, utilities, and transport infrastructure. The next stage of the master planning work is developing the vision for the garden community. This will be done as part of the broad programme of engagement. Members are aware that there is a consultation and engagement strategy, which was published in December 2020, a dedicated website to provide a central source of information about the garden community, an interactive engagement website, and a community liaison group. The community liaison group have met with Pryor and partners. A workshop was held in which the group discussed their hopes and fears for the garden community, and this discussion will help inform the forthcoming engagement survey, which will help shape the vision for the garden community. The communications manager and officers are currently finalising the programme of engagement, which will take place over the next few months. This will be shared once it's finalised. The engagement programme will include a survey, virtual workshops, including a workshop for local plan committee. A date for that hasn't been set yet, but I've been advised that it will be held in September, and I have been asked if there are any preferred dates or dates to avoid. The engagement programme will also include community drop-ins and street interviews. The engagement website includes tools allowing people to engage on an ongoing basis. 2 tools on the engagement website have recently closed, 3 words in which people are asked to submit 3 words that are important to them, and vision of the future. New tools recently launched on the engagement website are Send a Pic and Pin Your Thoughts. The Send a Pic tool asks people to upload photos based on themes of the sort of thing they want the garden community to become. Pin Your Thoughts asks people to drop pins on an interactive map to identify assets, opportunities, and issues that could be addressed as part of the garden community. An ongoing tool on the engagement website is Give Us Your Ideas. This tool welcomes ideas on anything and everything. When I wrote the report, 76 ideas had been submitted, and when I checked earlier today, it had increased to 90 ideas. The report includes a few ideas of the things that have been added to the website. Some other ideas are communal gardens, access for disabled people, innovation should be key, there should be high quality walking and cycling routes, and an experienced master planner should be involved. A schools project was also launched before the summer holidays in partnership with the Essex Children's University. It's supported by online lessons and a teacher's pack. The competition is for children who were in Year 5, moving up to Year 6 in September. Children are asked to animate, draw, or create a 3D model of their ideal home, neighbourhood, or a fun place to visit in the future. On the 22nd of July, Latimer was announced as the lead developer who will be working with Mersey Homes. Latimer is the development arm of Clarion Housing Group, the UK's largest provider of affordable housing. The profits from Latimer schemes are reinvested into Clarion Housing Group to build more affordable homes, improve and maintain existing homes, and support communities through the group's charitable foundation. And finally, the garden community is one of the government's National Model Design Code programme pilots. The purpose of the National Model Design Code is to provide detailed guidance on the production of local design codes and guides. The garden community is testing the scope, baseline, design vision, and coding plan aspects of the National Model Design Code. At the end of June, the council submitted an interim report to government. By the end of the 6-month testing period, the councils expect to submit a baseline report, including opportunities and constraints mapping, a draft vision statement, and a summary scoping document that provides principles on the design approach to inform the master planning. And further updates on progress with the National Model Design Code will be reported to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. The Leader of the Council asked me earlier today if he could make some comments at this stage. So, Paul, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. It was really just, I thought I'd come along this evening really just to back up the details on the announcement of the lead developer. There was a launch day. Myself, Councillor Ellis and Councillor Corey all attended. It was a good opportunity to meet with the people from Clarion. Their CEO was there and most of their senior management. The conversations were very broad because we only just knew that they were the lead developer. First glance, they seem to be quite a good choice, combined with Mersey Homes, who obviously as a local developer I'm probably happier with than some alternatives. They are not for profit, and we had some good conversations, but it's very early days, and of course there are many other unanswered questions about the project going forward, which need to be answered quite soon. But I just thought I'd come along this evening in case anybody had any specific questions. I might not be able to answer them, but I will always try.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Shelley, for the introduction. Now going to ask for members who wish to make any comments, and after each one of those I will ask Shelley to come back with reply. So, Andrea, you're first.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually can imagine I've got tons of notes on this, but I will try and keep it really brief, just what the questions are, rather than comment on stuff. There's a lot of talk about community engagement, both generally and with the liaison group. And I may not be speaking for my Grinstead councillor here, but she'll correct me if I'm not. But I think one of the fundamental issues for any of the surrounding communities is where are the buffers and what is the extent of the development. And I think in order to encourage people to engage with it positively, I think that could be the first, that should be the priority really. Because if you go back to the HIF funding, the number of houses was 6,500, but in the papers it's gone up to 9,000. That obviously makes a massive difference to either the densities or the development boundaries. And I think once that's set, which is the biggest concern for people, I think it's much more likely that people will start to engage. I sort of have an issue with where we're at with the master planning, because obviously we've got the link road going to a planning application, and I don't think it's a chicken and egg. I think that Link Road should come after the planning. So there's already a constraint in there that is a bit odd because it doesn't have planning permission. One, just a request: can we get the liaison group to put a name to this rather than TGCB, GC, whatever it is? You know, even if it's a working title, just so that we can start having maybe an affectionate relationship with it rather than a different one. And I suppose the only question I really want answered is, now that we've appointed the development partner to Mersey Homes, can it be confirmed or not whether or not we're going to be set up a development corporation? Because my understanding of the way the viability model was set up was very much with us in control of land value, and the uplifts could then go into infrastructure. And at the time, Mersey Homes had said they hadn't done any viability work simply because they knew that they couldn't afford to take the site on without a partner. So are we in a position yet to be able to confirm one way or the other on that? And will we be asking those developers as a group now to represent viability? Because I just feel like, because we're now completely reliant on policy, we could be at the mercy of developers, whereas when we had a plan to use a development corporation, we had some sort of control over what may or may not happen because we would be funding the infrastructure. So I think that confirmation one way or the other on that would be, again, helpful at this stage. Thank you.
Shelley, would you like to respond, please, to those questions?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, engagement buffers. I think we spoke at the last committee. I know there isn't anything out there isn't a plan yet, but the adopted Section 1 local plan that's part of the development plan that the DPD will have to conform to does refer to buffers between the Ghana community in Wivenhoe and Elmstead Market. In terms of the number of dwellings, that Section 1 plan does refer to an overall total of between 7,000 and 9,000 homes. A name for the garden community. It's something that I will discuss with the communications manager, and it's maybe something we can start thinking about now now we know who the lead developer is, rather than referring to it as TCB. And the Development Corporation, I'm afraid I can't answer that as a planner. I think that's an issue for the steering group.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, on the name, I quite agree. It was actually a point I made at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, that please can we come up with something other than TCBGC? I can just about manage it. On the Development Corporation, I'll be absolutely honest. No, I don't think a final decision has been made. I think it's obviously not just down to us. It's also down to what our partners, particularly tendering, want. And I'm a little bit concerned that what I think are some quite fundamental decisions perhaps haven't been taken. But we can't deny the pressure is on this, both around the HIF funding. We all know that 2024 is the key year. That is what the HIF funding requires. By then, the road has to be built and the RTS has to be built, and we have to have built a house, as I read it, under the terms. We're already, nearly autumn 2021, and I think the project really needs to accelerate if it's not going to start slipping, So yeah, I think it's something we, from our side, from Colchester Council side, we need to keep the pressure on, really, because I think that we've only had one meeting since May, and there are obviously quite a number of new people there, people from Essex County Council, some of the same faces from Colchester Borough Council, and I think there's a lot of the what I'd call visions and concepts need to turn into firm designs and invitations to tender for contracts quite soon, would be my comment. So my apologies, I can't be slightly more precise.
And Karen, you wanted to add to?
Thank you. Just to answer Andrea's question about viability and updating that work, I think it should be us updating that work rather than the developers, so that we're leading the way, because it is intended to be a local authority-led plan. So it's important that it's our evidence and we have ownership of that.
Julie, you're next.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm a bit mystified, actually, by the response we've just heard from the Leader of the Council. My understanding as the outgoing portfolio holder for the local plan was that we would not get ministerial approval for a development corporation with only one garden community, and I'm surprised that the Leader of the Council can't confirm that to be the case. So I think my question back to him is about the governance going forward. Will we see a joint planning committee formed with Tendring District Council? Will we see a joint local plan committee to deal with the governance issues? Because we've got to see some democratic accountability to the way the development plan document is developed. In particular, Shelley, you mentioned Wivenhoe and Elmstead. I'm surprised that you didn't mention a buffer between the Greenstead community, because we all want to see the protection of Salary Brook, and that is a really important consideration when you're talking about buffers. Andrea talked about the link road, and I think it's beholden on us to make sure everything fits together in terms of planning terms. So the link road and the cycle provision that is being developed by Ian Turner at Essex County Council does need to dovetail with the cycle provision that's been planned in terms of the town deal work, so that those two things link together, and I hope that officers are actually making those connections. And finally, Chair, if I may ask the Leader of the Council whether there is protection in terms of affordable housing and what the level of affordable housing will be delivered in the garden community, because there's been a lot of social media speculation about the garden community delivering less affordable housing than standard planning applications. If you can clarify that, I'd appreciate it, as you're our main representative on the steering group.
Shelley, would you like to handle the points that were aimed at you first, and then I'll go to the Leader of the Council?
Yes, just to apologise, when I mentioned a buffer between the garden community and Wivenhoe and Elmstead Market, apologies, I didn't also mention Colchester, and that is written into the Section 1 plan. I'm just reading here, safeguarding the important green edge to Colchester will be essential, with a new country park provided along the Salary Brook corridor and incorporating Chentwood.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, on the joint committee front, as Councillor Young will know, she was at the meeting, that there has been discussion and agreement to try and go forward with a joint planning committee. I'm not aware there's been talk of a joint local plan committee. I can't recall that being discussed. If I misunderstood that, then maybe, but I think there has. On the affordable housing, I'm not actually aware of any social media, or certainly any based on any fact. As far as I'm aware, the amount is actually built into the Section 1 plan at 30%. So I don't see how it would require, officers may contradict me here, it would actually require a variation to the plan to alter that. Perhaps officers might like to confirm, but certainly I've heard nothing from anybody even mention a change to the affordable housing, so I don't know where that's come from.
Chair, could I ask the Leader of the Council to clarify the point on the Development Corporation?
That was the point regarding
The point is that, I mean, I haven't been on the steering group for, a few months now. You have. So my understanding is that we wouldn't get ministerial approval for a development corporation as only one of the 3 garden communities are being taken forward. My question to you, is that still the case? Because you seem to be suggesting that there might be a possibility of a development corporation and that yet hasn't been resolved. So, could we have the up-to-date position from you, please?
Well, the good news is you've only missed one meeting, so there hasn't been a great deal which has happened. So I'll be absolutely honest, I don't think the matter has been discussed in detail, regrettably. As I mentioned earlier, I think it needs to move on a bit faster. I don't think there's enough meetings and I don't think there's enough discussion going on. I think the key question is, I think, for us as Colchester Borough Council, is to what degree, through whatever method, we want to influence the development of the garden community. My view is that we should be quite heavily involved, but particularly with some of the personnel changes, obviously we need to agree that with our partners and see what their views are. So I think it's a discussion perhaps we need to have again to find out where they stand on it. But on the ministerial question, you're right. If I recall, that was the conversation. I can't remember if there really was a definitive answer. So I think there was an assumption, but I don't know if they'd actually clarified it. So I'll happily do so again. But I'm not aware. I haven't actually heard that it's been completely ruled out. I don't know if you can recall that it was, because I think we were still talking about it at some of the meetings earlier in the year.
Councillor Barber next, then Councillor Hagan, and then Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Shelley and Councillor Dundas for the report. I'm a bit of a sceptic on this project. I didn't vote to adopt Section 1. I abstained, so I have a healthy level of scepticism about this, and I do worry when I hear about some of the issues that are already emerging in the pace of the project. And I'd agree with Councillor Dundas. It does seem that if it is going to be a success, that it needs to probably speed up a bit, particularly that 2024 deadline. That sounds alarmingly close. But as I said in the council meeting when we had the vote, I would do all I could to support it and make sure it's a success. So I'm very keen for us to get involved in the master planning as much as possible. I think that's really important. To make it a success is for everyone to feel involved. That was a big failure of the work that had occurred previously, was a feeling of detachment from the project. And I do feel that if we can bring people with us and not just do public information events, proper engagement and taking on board feedback, I think we have a much higher chance of success. And I do think on the consultation, we need to make sure it's broad enough, including if you look, I was just looking at the map on my computer, consulting areas such as up by Ardley and Dedham Langham will all be impacted by the traffic flows. And I do think it's worth making sure they have that breadth of involvement in the communities that we're consulting on. So I think that's really key. But yeah, I do think that 2024 deadline sounds alarmingly close. I'm old enough to remember when the garden communities were meant to self-fund themselves. So we've obviously got to ourselves in a position where we're beholden to the terms and conditions on this very large link road. And I'm still worried about what happens if that goes wrong, who's picking up the bill, any gaps in the costs of that. But probably that's not for this forum necessary, but I'm already starting to worry about, from what I'm hearing, particularly the pace of the project. But yeah.
Shelley, it's over to you. If you can pick out of that the questions. Some of it was more of a statement.
It was more of a statement, to be honest, because it's for information only, the paper, and I feel that all of the mistakes of the past we just cannot repeat again, because this would be a disaster on our doorstep if we do repeat it. And obviously, I think we've got a good chance to make a real success of it. That was more my point. Is there's warning signs. Let's make sure we address them early on, rather than, as has previously been done, become reactive when it's too late. That was all.
Thank you, Lewis. Can we move on to Councillor Hagan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Leader, for coming in and speaking with us this evening. Actually, Councillor Barber has just raised a couple of those points that I was going to bring up. Was about the engagement is one of them. One of the things I would like to see this council do is engage with new residents of this town. If you look at Stanway and Chesterwell, they will have seen and lived all the mistakes that have been made, all the errors, all the nameplates that weren't put up, sadly the deliveries that have got lost and the grass verges that haven't been cut. We've got an opportunity, not a decision that I would have made, to build 9,000 homes on the edge of Colchester, but we are where we are. We have an opportunity to look at those errors of the past, and before we decide to gridlock Colchester any more than it already is, let's look at making sure these houses are delivered in the correct way. I would leave that there. You don't need to come back to me. It was just a statement I want to make there. So maybe just engage with the residents of those areas, letter through the door, get people's feedback. It's vitally important. There was a question I had to the cost of the road. I think Councillor Barber mentioned it's not the time and place, but then again, this is the local plan committee, and there is a potential there to take the question away. If we are not able to deliver this road in time, which unlocks those 9,000 homes in the way that it will do so, we're all aware of that. But if it's not delivered in time, the cost will presumably go up. Who is going to pick up the tab? Is it the Colchester taxpayers? Is it going to be split with tendering? Is it going to be the government? We need to know that because that can have a serious consequence. Thank you.
Shelley, there were a couple of questions in amongst that. Would you like to deal with it, or would you ask Karen? How do you feel?
Yeah, I can't answer the cost of the road issue, but I can certainly find out and come back to the committee on that point. And in terms of engagement, we're certainly adopting a much improved engagement process. We have a dedicated officer, comms officer, who personally I think has really made a difference with the project, and she has been at this committee previously to help answer questions. We were a little bit constrained up until February when we adopted Section 1 in terms of what we could actually do and how far we could progress it. But again, that is starting to change. You've raised some interesting ideas. We've got Mersey Homes on board who certainly will know what their residents think about new development in Colchester, and they're probably responsible for quite a lot of it. What I wouldn't want to do is ask residents and get their snagging lists. I think it's important to keep it strategic, but certainly some of that feedback would be welcomed, and there's nothing to stop anyone from engaging in the process. Shelley outlined some of the work that's already taken place, and there's a dedicated engagement website which we can certainly promote a bit more, and you can certainly include it in local newsletters, because I appreciate there has been a lot of development in Stanway, and those new residents may well wish to contribute. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to come back on that, if you don't mind, Chair. Just to say, it is important that I think personally that the snagging lists are brought forward, because when you're a ward councillor and you're speaking to these people, just not having a nameplate of their road stops emergency services getting to them should they need to, stops deliveries. It's these little things. It's the last 2% of a finished development. And I think it is important that those residents' feedback is fed through, and snagging list or otherwise, I think it should be heard and it should be documented. And as for the interactive map, the first time I saw it was through the internal systems on Yammer. And there was a post, and I went through and had a look. So maybe I've missed an email, but maybe if you could please send that back out. We will certainly do our bit on our side, and I'm sure other councillors around the area will push that information out to residents too. So thank you.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear from new members of the local plan committee about their feelings about public engagement, because certainly for those of us who sat on the local plan committee before and been part of the previous administration, I think we would say that all we've ever heard about is talk about the garden community. So it's not that people aren't engaged on this issue. I think people absolutely are. And what's really good to see is the local residents that are engaging in this process. And it's really positive to see those that are using this new online tool to provide their thoughts. And I suppose, just coming back to what Councillor Hagan was saying, one of the supposed advantages of the garden community development is its development done differently. So you get some of that infrastructure in first, and you're not reliant on developers who don't live up to their obligations. And that was one of the reasons why we were keen on a locally led development corporation, because we felt that would provide more control for the local authority over the whole process. Unfortunately, it appears that isn't likely to go ahead now, and we'll have to make the best that we can through the DPD process. I just wanted to ask a few questions. The first one was about the announcement of the lead developer, because I think for those people that perhaps aren't au fait with the process, it might feel like the council's appointing the lead developer, and certainly some of the comms suggested that it was the council appointing ultimately Clarion to be that body. And I wondered whether you could clarify exactly who appointed the lead developer. Councillor Danders, you suggested that the steering group needs to meet more often, and that sounds like a good idea. I wondered whether you could tell us when the next meeting of the steering group is, and how more meetings can be arranged, and how reporting back can happen to this committee. It feels like the local plan committee is the best place for these issues to be aired in the open. I know that the steering group does discuss some confidential matters, but for us to get regular reports back as well, that would be really helpful. And in fact, Councillor Hagan had asked my other question around the infrastructure and the link road. Thank you, Chair.
Shelley, I think a couple of them were aimed at you, and then I'll bring the leader in to answer the other one.
Well, Mersey Homes and Clarion Housing Group have agreed to work together with Clarion Housing Group as the lead developer. The council hasn't been involved in appointing Clarion Housing Group, and we tried to ensure that the comms were clear, that apologies if people have found that it hasn't been clear.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up an earlier question on the cost of the link road, don't hold me to it because it's from memory. I haven't got it in front of me, but the figure of 65 to 70 million rings a bell. I think 67 was mentioned. I think in the recent document I've seen 70. Obviously the HIF bid is 99 million and the balance is towards the RTS. In terms of picking up any shortfall, at the hearings, the second lot of hearings in January 2020, if I recall correctly, and again it's from memory, I believe ECC stated that they believed the figure was correct and they would pick up any shortfall on the road, but again that is from memory. In terms of the next meeting, I think I've got third week of August in mind. It was to be this week, but some papers which were being prepared, I don't think were prepared, so it's been delayed by 2 weeks. So I think August 16th, 20th, something like that. I saw it pop up in my diary earlier today with a ping. I was pinged, but in a good way. And I think, yes, I think it's very fair that there are regular reports which come back to the local plan committee. I think it's something as a council we need to keep a close eye on as a council, as a body. As I said earlier, the pressure is on. I think we are all committed to this being wanting it to be a success, and wanting it to deliver the principles which which have been stated. I don't think there's any political division on that. I think we all believe in that. So I think, yeah, I'll speak to officers, and obviously I'm sure the chair will agree, hopefully, that it comes back as a regular item on your agenda.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I've got. So we on.
Claire, could I just make a point on quickly, one more point, please, if that's okay? I'll take that as a yes. I just think I am worried about the Link Road issue. I think it would be, I'm worried about it because I think I'm worried about it because early on I have concerns here and about how that would impact the development. And I just want to make sure that we do everything we can to mitigate that risk early on. That would be my only, I think, comment on it. And I know, obviously, Councillor Dundas, you subbed a lot on the local plan committee, so you were part of a lot of the discussions and shared a lot of concerns when this was going through the committee and full council. And I just want to make sure we don't have and I'm sure we won't, but just to make sure we don't have the tunnel vision and just assume the Link Road will be fine, there'll be no problems, county can just pick up the bill, that won't impact anything else. I just think we need to make sure, as ever, we have that backup in case there is issues that arise, that's all. And I think it coming back regularly here is really important part of it, because it's not scrutiny per se, but I think it's good to have the discussions to make sure, everything's ticking along as well as it can be. That was my final comment, really. Thank you, Chair.
Again, I don't think that requires an answer. I've got no other people wishing to speak. We're not required to make a decision, just merely to note. Do we note? Agreed. Okay, thank you. So we now move on to item 8, which is the development brief for the Abro site. So we have a speaker, Sir Bob Russell. So if you would like to come forward. Good evening, Sir Bob. You have 3 minutes, as you're well aware, and a bell will go after 2. And welcome to the table to Alistair as well.
Thank you, Chairman, members. It's a delight to be back at the next meeting following the one in June, when you had 3 fantastic reports, and one of them was on this particular site. And that's a very welcome step forward then, and I think tonight is another positive step forward, and I congratulate all involved. And I'm basically going to ask the committee to suggest, I don't know if the leader of the council is still here, but he was when I came forward. If you look at the minutes on of the last meeting, page 12 of today's paper, resolved unanimously to express the wish that Cabinet explore the purchase of acquisition of the Abro site for Ministry of Defence. I recognise that would involve a capital expenditure, not a matter for your committee, but a matter for the council collectively. It should be possible for one public body and another public body to work together. And this is something which I would urge the council collectively to ask the Member of Parliament to get the Ministry of Defence, DIO, and the Borough Council, for the Borough Council to acquire the site at whatever value is agreed, but payment would then only come forward once the site was developed. The thinking behind that is the Borough Council will then have 100% control over the site. I am concerned that with relaxations in planning, notwithstanding all the good intentions and what is set out in the report before you tonight, a smart developer could find his way round it, as we see smart developers do. But if the council is the legal owner of the site, then the Borough Council, working with the community, could actually achieve something. My concern is that people only think about today. The decisions that are made on the Roman Circus site and the Abro site will be there for generations. So it's not just doing a financial fix now because the DIO wants the money. It's to come forward with a comprehensive scheme which is of total benefit, not only for today, but for generations to follow. And the only way that you have a realistic chance of achieving that is the Borough Council to have total control. And therefore, I would urge you to support everything that's been put forward. I have one or two small observations, but that's not for tonight. But the importance is that all these fine words will not be, there's no guarantee unless the council owns the land. And I put that forward, that the council ask the Member of Parliament to secure an arrangement with the DIO whereby the council acquires the land and then in due course the financial cost is paid over when the site's developed. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution this evening. So we're over to Alistair. Would you like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This report seeks members' approval to adopt the Abro brief as a supplementary planning guidance document. The brief is being prepared, as set out in the report, because the MOD have made it known that the site is surplus to requirements and they intend to sell the site for redevelopment. As members will be aware, the site is located in a historically sensitive site, and the purpose of the brief is to guide development when a future application comes forward. The brief has been subject to extensive public consultation, and a summary of the comments are set out in the report, together with the response from offers and how they've been incorporated into the report. I note the comments from Sir Bob Russell, and indeed following the last local plan committee, officers have asked senior officers to explore the possibility of purchasing the site, and that is subject to ongoing work. In terms of this brief, members have been asked, should they have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise members are asked to adopt the planning brief as a supplementary planning guidance document. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. First speaker is Councillor Young.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think it's really interesting, the presentation we've had from Sir Bob about the prospect of public bodies working together and delaying the payment of the site until such time that the site is developed. You know, I want to put my personal thanks on record for the work that Alistair Day has done on this and other planning officers, because I think it's a tremendous piece of work that's been put forward. I think when we met with the I always get it Defence Infrastructure Organisation, DIO, it was really, at those points, it was about their aspirations about releasing the Middlewick site, but we brought up at the time the Babcock site, and at the time they didn't have any urgency about offloading that site. That must be almost 2 years ago now, because we've been in lockdown a very long time. So I guess they're getting nearer to the point where they will want to release this site. I think the fact that we've got this development plan document in place is really, really positive, because it does give us some protection and gives us a framework in terms of unifying the Roma Circus and making more of that in terms of this visitor attraction. But like Sir Bob, I do hope that the administration do consider acquiring this site, and I fully support the work that's been done on this. I think that's it for me. You know, I think you know, we need to move forward as swiftly as we can to try and make that happen. And if we can work with our MP to make that a reality, then I'm all for it.
Don't know, there was a question in there, Alistair, for you to answer.
No, all I could really say is planning officers have worked proactively to put the tools in place, both through the brief, the Roman Circus management plan and the extensions to the conservation area, to guide development as fully as possible.
Thank you, Alistair. I've got no other speakers indicating on this item. So on that point, the Leader of the Council is here this evening. He's heard your comments, and that will be for Cabinet to discuss at a later date. But for us tonight, in 2.1 is to adopt the Abro development brief as a planning guidance document. Sorry.
Chair, I meant to say, and forgive me if I may, it does give us the option of going for an SPD, which will give us additional protection. Could we get some feedback from Alistair about how we might move forward with that?
That is a question. Thank you.
I may have to defer to Karen for this. My understanding is that a supplementary planning document would need to go through a more extensive work in terms of sustainability audits and public consultation. Obviously, that would lengthen the period before the guidance document is adopted. I don't know if Karen wishes to add further to that.
Yes, what we could do is, if committee are happy tonight, adopt it as a guidance document. So we've got something in place which sets out the Council's policy approach should the site be sold. And in the meantime, we can look at what additional requirements are necessary to make it a supplementary planning document, which does add a little bit more weight to the document in decision making. So I think that would probably give us the best of both worlds if committee's happy with that.
Karen, on that basis, members, if they so chose, could opt for 4.2. It includes
you
both
could opt
those
for that,
points.
but I think Karen's approach is probably the best approach, whereby we adopt the guidance, and if members have a desire to take it to the next level in terms of becoming an SPD, then that can be taken forward once the guidance document has been adopted. So you've got an interim brief in place and then take it forward to full adoption.
So obviously I'm thinking for Mr. Clifford's benefit, what wording would you like? Because at the moment all it says in here is to adopt the Abro development brief. Do you want some associated wording to go with that? And if so, what?
You could say to adopt the brief and officers to explore the feasibility of adopting the brief as a full SPD and to report back.
I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Happy to second it.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are now on item 9, which is net gain. It says, find the page, 73. And right. So we have Catherine. Yeah, Catherine Bailey. Good evening. Sorry, I'm playing dodgems around the tripod there. We haven't got any speakers on this item this evening, so would you like to present the report, please?
Oh, I have got. Thank you, Chair. This report introduces the government's approach to biodiversity net gain, which is due to become a national policy through the government's Environment Bill. It's currently undergoing its passage through Parliament and is anticipated to be enacted in autumn 2021. The government has identified that to meet the net gain condition for planning permissions, biodiversity gains will need to be measured using a metric. They have been working on such a metric over the past 2 years and have recently introduced Biodiversity Metric 3. This was launched earlier this month on July the 7th. This is currently not mandatory, but it's anticipated to be the industry standard once the bill is enacted later this year. It will not actually become mandatory to provide the net gain provisions for another 2 years after that. And there will be a 2-year transition period until late in 2023. The metric, it is worth noting with the metric that this focuses on typical and widespread species and is not designed for protected habitats and features which need to be given a broader consideration. Protected and locally important species are not considered through the metric, and they should be addressed through existing policy and legislation. And the impacts on irreplaceable habitats, again, are not adequately measured by the metric and will require separate consideration. The biodiversity metric is accompanied by a user guide, and this makes clear that the metric is designed to inform decisions, but not to override them, and that the biodiversity mitigation hierarchy still applies. That is, to avoid, to mitigate, and to compensate. Colchester Borough Council currently identifies conservation and enhancement of biodiversity within ENV1 environment in the current adopted local plan, but moving forward in the emerging local plan, the need for net gain has been identified within policy SP8, development and delivery of a new garden community, in the new ENV1 environment, and within policy SC2 for Middlewick Ranges. And in terms of next steps, the need for a biodiversity net gain SPD was recognised in the Council's climate emergency strategy, and this is needed in order to inform developers, officers and the public of upcoming requirements in the emerging local plan as well as the Environment Bill. And another necessity of net gain once the bill becomes enacted and we have our emerging local plan in place is that we will need to identify a series of sites with partners in order for off-site net gain to be delivered. So that case may arise where you have smaller sites or urban sites which cannot deliver the net gain on the site itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Anybody wishing to ask a question on this? Andrea?
It's not so much a question, it's a statement. I just wanted to go on record to say that I think this government policy is at best, half-baked. I don't think it goes anywhere close to addressing a climate emergency, because basically it doesn't equate to the net loss. As a for instance, the link road is going to basically destroy ancient woodland, and the net gain for that is a couple of saplings and some grass seed, which will take 100 years to actually pay back the carbon that it's destroying. And what it's not doing is taking any notice of the development itself, and obviously that development is a road which is pumping out CO2. So I think it's, there's all sorts of problems with it. When you look at it as a round, so for instance, if you're truncating mature hedgerows, what that does is totally destroy wildlife corridors. Which means basically every species on that site will be extinct because they can't actually transverse them. Equally, if you're putting roads in the way, they're going to, there's an obvious conclusion to an animal trying to cross a road, which is they get squashed. Friends of the Earth don't like it. They have said that in their evidence gathering on it, all the countries that are doing it, like North America, Austria and Germany, who've been doing it for decades now, say that it doesn't work. And certainly all the UK offsetting pilots have been inconclusive at best. So I question it. I know there's nothing we can do about it. But I just wanted to go on record. I actually think it's a policy that provides cover for politicians, including us, and therefore allows for economic benefit for developers and bankers, and just to carry on business as usual. And I think to use it to justify questionable development is seriously worrying. I know there's nothing we can do. I assume that we made representations to government when it was being consulted on, but I just wanted to go on record to say I think it's rubbish.
Do you want to comment, Catherine? I mean, it's national legislation. I'm not sure if the portfolio order is wishing to. Did you put your hand up? As though whether you want to.
Sorry, I hadn't indicated, Chairman, no, but it is something that I'm quite frustrated about. I think Councillor Luxon hits the nail on the head. I have said before, I think net gain is the right... there was nothing beforehand, so actually the government at least is trying to do something, but like a lot of things that, whether it's politicians getting involved in these things, I don't know, but the idea is a great one. The execution is probably not quite so good. I said, I think at the last local plan committee that I was part of, when we were talking about, I think some people had come in to talk about Middlewick, and I said I had an issue with net gain in that you could take down 100 yards of ancient hedgerow and you could plant 150 yards of new hedgerow, and you've made a net gain of 50 yards. But actually, it's not a gain at all. You've still lost a massive amount. I like the idea. I think the execution is a problem. I'm frustrated that it's a system which is open to gaming, I think, or could be open to gaming. We're talking about finding ways that we can actually utilise net gain for our own benefit, which is a good thing. It's something I've said to officers I'm quite keen to do. If we're going to go down this road, we need to identify places that we as a borough could take advantage of that biodiversity net gain. But I also know that there are landowners out there who are offering the same thing, who are quite happy to offer their land up, take it out of agriculture, for instance, and plant woodland, which could be of benefit to them for a financial reward to help developers out. And that's not what this is about, really. But I think it could happen. I just think, as an idea, I think we didn't have anything before, so I think it's a good one. But I think it's open to so much abuse at the moment that it still needs an awful lot of work. And we've seen the issue with Middlewick recently, with metrics and how inefficient metrics can be. And then you're reliant on ecology experts who also may not have all the answers, unfortunately, and then let you down at crucial moments. So, yeah, from my point of view, I think it's a great idea. I just think it's incredibly... It's not going to work in its current form, I don't think. So I think we need to do... I think you're noting this report, aren't you? And I know that officers did make and it will have been under you, Julie, I think, is that made representations, and fairly strong representations along the lines of what I've just said, actually. So We like it, we just don't like its in its current form. I think. Am I right, Karen?
Councillor Young.
That's it from me on net gain. Sorry, I hadn't indicated
Thank
to
you.
speak no, but my views are, I think, they're fairly well known. I'm frustrated by it.
Councillor Young.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's sort of a side issue, but an associated issue that I wanted to raise, and that is about the Natural Asset Register. And it's something that's been discussed as part of the conversations that have been had in terms of the Environment Committee. But before we get to a point where we've got new planning legislation in place and zoning coming our way, the Environment Committee were really keen to ensure that we had a natural asset register drawn up, and that's something that this committee chair needs to focus on sooner rather than later to make sure we protect some of our sites before the zoning actually hits us. So it does fit in with this topic that we're discussing today, but slightly a different point that I wanted to make this evening.
Catherine.
I just wanted to add that the metric, it does come with very extensive guidance at a national level, and I think it is important that we get our own interim guidance, and then in future an SPD when we've got our new local plan in place, which has the policies for net gain in it, and when the bill is enacted. Because I think through that we can, as you say, identify key assets and emphasise all the points that are in the guidance, so that we as officers, as well as the developers, as they come forward, understand that this is not just an opportunity to offset some of the damage they've done on a site in Colchester with planting on a private site elsewhere, and that there is the hierarchy which they have to follow, and that we may have preference, which my understanding from the guidance is what we can ask for the gain to be either located on the site or close by to the site. So there are social factors that are weighed in this, as well as environmental factors.
Have Councillor Hagan next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Caroline, I believe your name. Yeah, just my eyesight, it's not as good as it once was. This is all kind of new to me, I'll be honest with you. It's a lot of information to take on board. One thing I will say, it's good to see that the progression of the biodiversity metric net gain 3.0 moving on. It will become 4.0 and so forth. The question I have is the current version, if you will, which one will be used before they put a spade in the ground? When they go through planning, for example, they're going to put outright planning for 1,000 homes. Do they use the one that was agreed at the local plan, which will be potentially either 2 or 3, depending on site, or will it be the latest version? And one other question, again, I might have misunderstood it. You can please do correct me. I'm willing to learn, but there seems to be a couple of sites there that perhaps were using 3.0 as opposed to 2.0 in other areas. I'm just wondering what the reasons were behind that. Why wasn't the same used across all for the local plan? Unless that question is totally irrelevant, and then I apologise. Thank you.
So the current version is Metric 3, which was published on July the 7th. So any developer, and they have started to come forward with metric calculations for net gain already on development sites. So at the point of submission stroke determination, potentially they should be using the current metric. So that is currently 3. So we don't identify in the local plan which metric it is. It's just the most up-to-date version. And the reason that the beta 2 version bespoke was used for Middlewick was because that work was done before metric 3 was published. So does that answer the question?
For the moment, thank you.
Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and update on this. I was just going to ask about the consultation which is in paragraph 11 of the report, and that's included in the section 2 examination, is it then, or the section 2 part of the local plan, and we anticipate to get the results on the proposed modifications then? I just wasn't entirely clear on that side of it. I just didn't understand, basically. Not that it's not particularly clear there, I just was just wondering how it worked and how that would tie in perhaps to the master planning of the garden communities, because I think my view very much mirror Councillor Ellis's and Councillor Luxford-Vaughan's. I think that when we master plan the site, I think it'd be disappointing if we only ended up replacing very historic parts of our natural environment with a few shrubberies. And I just want to know how it all ties in, if that's okay. Thank you.
So in relation to the paragraph in the paper, our policy for net gain is identified in the emerging local plan as a modification, and that all the modifications will be consulted on for a period of 6 weeks if they are accepted by the inspector. So,
thank you, Catherine.
Thanks.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair, but I think all my questions have already been answered.
You didn't hear me? Did you hear me then? Is that what you said, my microphone?
No, sorry, I was just saying that other councillors had already covered the areas that I wanted to cover.
Okay.
So.
In that case, I don't have any other speakers. And on 2.1, it says no decision is required. The report is for information only. So,
May just want to note it, Chairman.
yes, duly noted. You agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Catherine, very much indeed. And now we're on to first home, which is page 79 of the agenda. So, and it's Bethany. Hi, good evening. Getting to be regular. The last time was at planning. Good evening. We have no speakers, so would you like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everyone. The government have introduced a new initiative for discounted market housing for first-time buyers known as First Homes. This came into effect from the 28th of June 2021 via a written ministerial statement and a new section within the planning practice guidance known as the PPG. A first home must be discounted by a minimum of 30% against the market value, and after this discount has been applied, the first sale must be no higher than £250,000. The 30% discount on market value will remain in perpetuity, with a restriction registered on the title at Land Registry and through Section 106 agreements to ensure that this discount is indeed contained within perpetuity. The government are due to publish templates for planning obligations in due course. As with the MPPF, there are transitional arrangements in place, which mean if a local plan was submitted for examination before the 28th of June 2021, first home policies are not required. As the Colchester local plan was submitted in October 2017 and is currently subject to examination, it will not be necessary for first home policy requirements in this current local plan. although the planning inspector is likely to consider through the examination whether a requirement for an early update may be appropriate. The transitional arrangements also outline that where a local plan is adopted through these arrangements, that first home requirements will also not apply to planning applications until the requirements are introduced through a local plan update or review. As with the previous report, this is just for information only, so there's no recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any speakers on this item, please? No, I'm not here. See, Councillor Luxford-Vaughan, sorry.
Okay, if I thought the last government policy was rubbish, I've written pants next to this one. That kind of sums up how I feel about it. I mean, I think, you know, when you read it initially, it sounds really great because it's, you know, it's there to help out local people and essential workers. But unfortunately, you know, so is Help to Buy, which is going to be phased out to be replaced with what I think is really quite a clumsy policy. And I think we've identified in the report some of the problems. So in 5.23, we say it doesn't help Colchester people because of the gap, you know, in wages and stuff. But I was listening to a planning podcast when it was being consulted on, and they were reporting that the Guardian say basically it's like 96% of people that need to buy a house are actually disenfranchised by this particular policy. So it's a very tiny amount of people that actually work for. I could go into the politics of that, but I'll leave that. I think there's a serious concern about the cost implications for us because the discount is carried on in perpetuity. So there's actually quite a lot of work that we have to do in order to make it go forward. And I doubt very much we're going to get any kind of extra money to cover that. I suppose my main thing is it will not solve the housing crisis. I don't think it goes anywhere close to solving the housing crisis. Additional problems with it, for instance, Shelter hate it, and they would have done the proper research when it was back at consultation stage. I think it really limits the market. If you're one of the lucky 4% that can actually use this scheme, then when you come to sell on, because you have to sell on that discount, your market is incredibly small. So actually that jumping up the ladder thing, which this should be helping people do, I don't see how that works. In practical terms, I think you're stuck in the one-bedroom house that you bought before you had the family. And I don't quite understand how that transition works. I think there's a significant problem, and this is a question, but I highlight my questions, which is where does the 30% saving come from? Because if it's either the developer or the landowner, which is where I've speculated it is coming from, I can hear now, oh, we've got viability problems later on. So when it's helping such a small market, we're going to see the knock-on effect of that in other things that we do really care about, like the rest of the affordable housing and social rented, not least the infrastructure of the project, because they're going to go, oh, we've got to pay out for all of this stuff. Yes, there's lots and lots of problems. I suppose my main interest in the report was the fact that it said that this doesn't come into action until for our local plan or neighbourhood plan because they were submitted before 2021. And they're just referring back to a question from Councillor Young earlier. Our SPD, one of those about affordable housing, which I made a big fuss about at the time of consultation, does reduce the social rented proportion of affordable housing for garden communities, not for the rest of development in Colchester, but for garden communities. And the reasoning within that report was to do with viability. When I questioned it with officers, I was told, oh, it's because we're bringing in the first homes policy. Well, actually, we don't need to. So we're subsidising garden communities, and yet they're supposed to be so much better. than anything else. So I would like, my secondary question is, can we go back and revisit the SPD, because it doesn't need to make the split that it has. We all know that the demonstrated need for this area, and when I say this area, I mean from Braintree to the coast, is for social rented. That it's up there, it's actually probably above 80%, and yet on the garden communities we're reducing that. So of the 30%, 80% down to 70%, if that makes any sense to anyone. It does to me in my head, but I've got pictures going on, so that might make it more clear. So there's two questions in there. Can we change the SPD to be equitable across all development in Colchester, and where is the 30% saving coming from on these houses?
It's all yours, Bethany.
Thank you. I think I might start answering some questions and then throw it over to Karen to help with. In terms of the extra work that will be needed from the local authority with the discount remaining, that is something that all councils are aware of. MHCLD haven't made any announcement yet if there will be any burden funding available, so we're waiting to see what decision is made on that. In terms of the affordable housing SPD, we are already going to restart looking at that following adoption of the emerging local plan. But the policy requirement for affordable housing is set in the Section 2 local plan at 30%, but the more detail will be in that SPD once we've adopted the local plan. Obviously, Karen may like to add a bit more to that.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, the two questions, the cost, that 30% saving, probably equates to the same amount as a developer will sell under this policy to a private purchaser, or they will sell under the current policy to a registered provider. So it will fall to the developer and the landowner who's willing to sell at a price that will afford that. The second part, I think Beth mentioned, and you're aware, we consulted on a revision to the SPD last year. Because of the local plan progressing, we haven't taken that forward. We do need to update the evidence base in light of changing national policy and changes more generally. So we'll be doing that and updating the SPD, bringing it back to this committee. I don't believe the tenure of affordable housing has been changed or set for the garden community. The percentage has been set. I did have the Section 1 plan up on my screen earlier, but I closed some things down because I couldn't find Alistair's report when I needed it. So certainly the policy talks about 30%. I think the tenure types are still to be established.
Andrew, you want to come back?
I just wanted to come back. You know, I agree that it's 30% and it's set in policy, but my understanding of the SPD was all development outside of the garden community is an 80-20%, 80-20 split, with the 80 being social rented, and on a garden community it was 70-30. If you're telling me that that's not the case, I'd be delighted, but obviously I know that it might sound like massive detail, but it's really important, I think, because I think social rented is far more valuable to this community than right to buy or any other crazy scheme.
Yes, and we've actually been moved away from social rented to affordable rented in recent years, which is a discounted rent, generally 80% of market rents. Social rent is more desirable, I agree with you, but we haven't been permitted or we haven't been encouraged to facilitate that through Section 106 agreement. So a return to social rent, I think, would be welcomed by everyone in this room, I suspect. Whether that's possible, certainly the Ministry have talked about social rent in relation to first homes. But how that detail pans out remains to be seen. There are some pilots. We'll watch those with interest. What I would say is that the SPD that you're referring to, where it talks about garden communities, wasn't adopted. So it isn't policy or guidance at this point in time.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I follow a lot of what Councillor Luxford-Vaughan has also said around affordable housing, and that our focus should be on affordable rent and social rent, and that and even above that, I think that, you know, houses for social rent should be delivered by the council, and, you know, that is at least some of what the council is delivering through the policies that we put in place for the new house building programme. I'm really concerned about the first homes policy, and I was when the consultation came out, and I'm concerned partly because, you know, I think it won't even really help first-time buyers in Colchester, and I think that's laid out quite clearly in 5.23 in the report, that for people in Colchester you know, who want to get on the housing ladder, getting on the housing ladder is really tough, whatever discount would be provided, and the report suggests that actually you'd need a discount of 65% for households on the average modal income to be able to get onto the housing ladder. And I'm also concerned because the government launched a previous scheme around starter homes in 2015 that were supposed to deliver 200,000 homes, a reduction of 20%, and they didn't deliver a single one of those homes. Zilch, zero, nada, nothing. And, you know, it's clear that the first homes won't arrive in Colchester for many years to come anyway, and they might not even, you know, be suitable once we get to that stage. So, you know, it's useful for us to have this report. I suppose my only question would be, looking at the sort of timescale in terms of adoption of our local plan, and when we might be looking at a review that would potentially impact us having to implement the first homes policy. And I think one of the other, you know, really obscure elements of this is about how the whole scheme is funded over the long term, and the costs to the authority in terms of managing the scheme too. And it just feels to me like there are likely to be a lot of people that might get rich off the back of this scheme, and it won't be, you know, anybody who actually wants to buy a house.
Thank you. In terms of when this may come forward in a local plan, it will depend on what our current local planning inspector has to say. It might be something that he feels would warrant an early review. That's in the PPG. That's the terminology used in there, that it's down to the inspector to determine if it would trigger a need for an early local plan review. So we will obviously need to wait to see what his feelings are on that. So in terms of timescales, we don't really know right now. It would have to be one that would have to wait and see through the examination, really.
Councillor Young.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting debate, and I think it presents us with more questions than answers, actually, Chair. In terms of an early PPG review, in terms of our supply, our 5-year supply, we know that at the moment we've got a requirement to review at 5 years. if the inspector determines an early review, will that mean that we'll be moving to the higher figure than we currently have to deliver in terms of our supply each year? And just in layman's terms, if you can sort of clarify for me, and maybe others who might be confused about this, am I right in understanding that when developers come forward with a scheme, they will be, instead of negotiating their 106 agreement, which might be 30% affordable housing or homes for rent, they will be saying, well, going forward, we will be doing the first homes proposal, and therefore that funding that is normally made available will no longer be made available because that will be used to discount some of those properties for first-time buyers. Am I right in my understanding of that? And I guess if I am right in my understanding of that, it looks like we're not delivering in terms of social homes for rent already, and it looks like it's going to get worse going forward.
Thanks, Julie. Just going back to something Adam mentioned first, if that's okay, and that was the management of the scheme and the cost to the local authority. The Ministry acknowledged that there will be additional burdens on the local authority in terms of implementing and managing this scheme, but they haven't announced any additional funding. I think Beth mentioned that in her presentation. But they have acknowledged that they're looking into it, and I imagine that's part of the pilot process that's going on at the moment. In terms of the review, all local plans should be reviewed within 5 years anyway. So I guess we're looking at a period somewhere between, realistically, 3 to 5 years' time, given how long it takes to conduct a review. When a review kicks in, then we do have to look at the latest methodology for calculating household growth and housing targets. So yes, if that remains a higher figure, that's what we will have to take into account at the time. And in terms of Section 106 and funding, I'm trying to think how to put this. The policy requires 30% affordable housing. Within that 30%, there will be an element of first homes. The remainder of that will be made up by the tenures in the council's policy. So there will still be a significant amount of affordable rent provided, but there won't be quite as much, and an element of that 30% will be discounted homes for sale, which won't meet the priority needs. So I don't think it will affect the overall figures, but it will affect who those affordable homes are suitable for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how I read 1.2 as well. So, Councillor Hagan, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on I think Andrea mentioned about the Help to Buy scheme. Was that the scheme you were talking about? Apparently that's still going on until the end of March 23 for new first-time buyers as well. But also, people watching at home might consider this to be doom and gloom. Well, actually, it's there are a few other schemes out there that we are not mentioning, and of course, one of those schemes is the 95% mortgage guarantee scheme, and that's an excellent scheme released by the government recently to help those people get onto the housing ladder. And I know firsthand of someone who's actually going to be taking that forward, and it is helping them to get their first property after saving so much towards a deposit, and now they can afford their first home. And of course, you've got shared ownership as well. So I just wanted to make those points. Although this particular scheme, the first home scheme, might not be for everybody, there are other schemes available And of course, it's down to the individual to make their choice. Thank you.
I was just going to draw you to a close by saying this is the item tonight and not what else is on offer around the world. Thank you for that. We are again, I have no other speakers. I'll just check and see if Lewis wanted to, and he doesn't. No decision required, so therefore Andrea,
Sorry,
just in the
Chairman.
nick of time.
Yeah, I just wanted some definition on something, and I don't mind if it comes outside the meeting, but I wanted to say it now, because then otherwise it saves me an email. But when I was talking about social rented, I think I meant affordable rented. So could we have a definition of what the difference is between the two of them? And also, just to go back to Councillor Young's question about 106 agreements, my understanding is anything in the local plan that is included in section 1 or section 2 will not have to deliver first homes. That's correct. Yeah, okay, thank you.
The other thing I saw as well, just before going to the point of noting, and that is the maximum period of time to complete is only 3 months. And with housing, that quite often is very short. So, but nonetheless, it's a different element to a form of social housing. Right, so in the report 2.1, no decision is required as this is for information only. So can we formally note? Agreed? Agreed. Now that, as far as I'm looking at, is the end of the matters of business for this evening. So it's all concluded, and thank you very much for attending.